Mark Rogers TV running down every Power 5 conference schedule for 2014. We're almost done with the SEC. We still have Texas A&M, and we've got the Ole Miss Rebels. All right, Ole Miss used to be on my list of teams that never scheduled anybody decent in non-conference play, i.e. Mississippi State. Check out our video on the Bulldogs non-conference play in 2014. Hideous. Ole Miss, you saved yourself this season and have the past couple of years with that home and home against Texas. Love that series. Texas Ole Miss. Longhorns really drubbed the Rebels a couple years ago, but then the Rebels got the payback in Austin in front of 100,000 last season by 3 touchdowns. Now Ole Miss takes on Boise State in the opener. That's a nice little matchup. Interesting matchup with the Broncos taking on the Rebels. No Chris Peterson at Boise State as the head coach, the very successful head coach that has put Boise on the map, moves on to the Pac-12 and the Washington Huskies. The Rebels could be catching a break here. Remember Boise State and their many early season W's against top quality opponents, including Georgia of the SEC, and the Broncos laid waste to Mark Richt's club about 5 years ago at the Georgia Dome. This game also at the Georgia Dome, and again, we love this game. It's Boise State and Ole Miss in Atlanta. Other than that, the Rebels with little to offer. So I give them the pass on the one big game against Boise State. The Broncos coming off a 10-3 campaign. Other than that, the Louisiana-Lafayette game is a decent game, a regional game. We understand why Ole Miss is going to play Memphis, South Alabama. They're going to play Louisiana-Lafayette or any of the Louisiana directional schools on a fairly regular basis. Understand those games. Arkansas State. Don't want those to be the headline games, though. So in addition to Boise State, it would be nice if the Rebels played one more decent opponent. But here are the other 3 non-conference games. Again, Louisiana-Lafayette, the Raging Cajuns last year at 9-4. They won the New Orleans Bowl. Gives an indication, though, when the 2 best opponents they played, the 2 Power 5 conference teams that they played, Arkansas and Kansas State, they got drubbed in both of those games by 3 touchdowns. The game against Memphis, again, Ole Miss, a long-standing rivalry. I guess you could call it a rivalry. They're only like an hour away from the University of Memphis, and they've played them for a long time. I was down in SEC country for 7 football seasons covering the Rebels, the Crimson Tide, and the Bulldogs, and this one was on the slate just about every year, Ole Miss and Memphis. So I understand playing this game. There's some decent talent in Memphis, and Ole Miss trying to keep the pipeline going out of that Memphis football talent, but not so much like it is in basketball. The Tigers coming off a 3-9 campaign. Memphis has been atrocious in football in recent seasons, and again in 2013 at 3-9. All right, well, who else do we have? We've got the Presbyterian game being played in November. How does Ole Miss come up with that game? Presbyterian. I know nothing about them, and if I was doing a Presbyterian 2014 schedule analysis, I would be applauding them for playing Ole Miss, but not so much the other way around. So for Ole Miss, again, Boise State, that's going to be the pivotal one. That's a toss-up, it appears, at this point. Rebels probably with a little more athleticism and speed, but Boise State backs down from no one. That game in Atlanta. Louisiana-Lafayette, Ole Miss, a substantial favorite in that one. Memphis a couple weeks later, got to win that game, of course, and Presbyterian. So possible 4-0 in the non-conference season for the Rebels, possibly 3-1 as well. All right, let's look at conference play. Of course, there's the non-division foe, which is Vanderbilt, the designated rivalry for Ole Miss, as, again, you hear us talk about this in Mark Rogers TV, and we look at Tennessee, Alabama. That makes sense. Auburn, Georgia, of course, the South's oldest rivalry, but the rest of them don't make a whole lot of sense. And this one as well, excuse me, Ole Miss and Vandy. It was a great game in Nashville last season, and the Rebs make a return trip in week 2 to Vanderbilt and Nashville. And Derek Mason's first game at Vanderbilt in the SEC. Okay, so it's Boise State, it's Vandy, it's Louisiana-Lafayette. Open date before Memphis. Don't necessarily know if you need an open date at that point, but you got the Tigers. Okay, now comes the meat of the schedule. 5 extremely difficult games. So again, we're knocking Ole Miss's non-conference schedule to a certain extent. We love the Boise State game, but in the SEC, No free rides. Even if you catch a break like the Rebs kind of do in the non-division games with at Vandy and also Tennessee, two of the lighter weights in the other division. No Georgia, no South Carolina, no Missouri. But this is the tough stretch here for the Rebs. Alabama at home, at Texas A&M, Tennessee at home, at LSU, Auburn. So that's 5 extremely difficult games. They should be a substantial favorite against Tennessee. When I say substantial, touchdown to 10 points to 13 points, something in that range, you would guess at that point in the season. The other games, they could be an underdog in 4 of these 5 games. Definitely against the Crimson Tide. On the road to Texas A&M, we'll see how the Aggies play at that point in the season with a new quarterback, most likely the freshman, and also new skill position players and key spots there. At LSU, that's been a tussle for the Rebels and been a great game in this series, and a game in which the Rebels against an old rival LSU has put themselves back on the map against an elite program, and the Rebels winning a couple games in the last few years against LSU, and looking at last year's game as well. And then, of course, Auburn's going to be extremely difficult, but that game at Oxford and a possible upset there. So let's say the Rebs go 2-3 in that stretch. They could be undefeated hosting the Crimson Tide in October. Then they go 2-3 in that stretch, most likely. 2-3's probably a good showing against those 5 opponents. Then that big Presbyterian clash. Then they've got the open date. Then they close with 2 winnable games at Arkansas. Probably the worst team in the SEC, along with Kentucky. Excuse me. Then Mississippi State to close it out. And, of course, the Rebels trying to bounce back and take vengeance for that fumbled overtime loss at Starkville last season. So the Rebels, what are we looking at here? Probably an 8-4 campaign. Could be 7-5. I think 8-4 would be really good against, again, this 5-game stretch. Bama, Texas A&M, Tennessee, LSU, Auburn. That's extremely tough, but very manageable. Otherwise, Rebels have a chance to go 9-3, 7-5 at the worst. I think they can at least manage 7-5. And Ole Miss has basically hit that spot in the last 2 seasons under Hugh Freeze. Would love to break into the top 25 and stay there for a full season in Hugh Freeze's 4th season at Ole Miss. Okay, Rebels fans, time to talk this schedule. I know you're going to defend this non-conference slate of Memphis Presbyterian and also Louisiana-Lafayette. I don't hate the Louisiana-Lafayette effort, but I would love to see one more powerhouse, not an elite program, but a decent program, maybe an ACC team, maybe North Carolina, somebody like that on this schedule. But it does start in grand fashion, so Ole Miss does get on the national map with that opener against Boise State at the Georgia Dome. Let's talk Rebels right here on Mark Rogers TV.